They say vacations are meant to unwind the mind, a chance to escape, relax, forget. But what if you step into a place you were never meant to find? What if your dream getaway turns into a nightmare that won't let you leave? Even when you run, even when you scream, even when you beg. This is the first of 3 vacation stories that remain carved into memory, not because of joy, but because of terror. The story begins with Mia and Jordan, a young couple in their late 20s. Adventurous, carefree, and newly engaged, they had a tradition of taking an off-grid trip every year. No phones, no cities, just nature and each other. This year, Jordan had found a listing buried in the depths of an online travel forum. Black Hollow lakefront cabin, private, isolated, serene. The photos looked rustic but cozy. A wooden 2-story cabin nestled by a lake surrounded by thick pines. No neighbors for miles. Just silence and wilderness. It was perfect. They arrived late afternoon on a Friday. The road to the cabin was barely a road at all, more like a dirt path twisting through unmarked forest. When the trees finally parted and the lake shimmered in the sun, they both gasped. The air was still, the water a mirror. The cabin stood watching them like a forgotten relic. Inside, it smelled of pine and dust. The walls were wood-paneled, the furniture old but sturdy. There was no TV, no radio. Just a fireplace, creaky stairs, and a diary left on the coffee table, bound in cracked leather. Mia picked it up and flipped through the pages. "Looks like a guest book," she smiled. "People used to stay here." She read aloud. March 14th, 1998. Heard scratching last night. Thought it was a raccoon. But it kept circling the house. Didn't sleep. June 3rd, 2003. Woke up to wet footprints inside. Door was locked. Nobody else here. July 21st, 2012. We made it out. Barely. Don't trust the lake. Jordan laughed nervously. People write the weirdest stuff in these things. They chalked it up to vacationers playing pranks and spent the evening by the fire, sipping wine, wrapped in a blanket. When night fell, the forest outside came alive with distant hoots and crackling leaves. The kind of sounds that city people aren't used to, random, aimless noises that sound close, then vanish. But around 2 a.m., Mia woke up cold. The fireplace had burned out, but that wasn't what stirred her. It was a sound, a soft, slow dragging noise, like something being pulled across wood. She froze, straining her ears. The cabin was still. Then it came again, closer. She nudged Jordan. "Wake up. Listen." They both sat up. Nothing. Then, thump, thump, from downstairs. Jordan grabbed the flashlight and crept down the stairs. Mia stayed by the bedroom door, clutching the thick blanket. He scanned the room. Nothing was out of place. But the front door was ajar. He was sure he'd locked it. Mia's voice trembled from above. "Check the floor." He looked down. Faint, wet footprints trailed from the doorway to the fireplace. But outside, the porch was dry. It hadn't rained in days. They barricaded the door and barely slept. The next morning, they tried to laugh it off. Maybe an animal. Maybe they didn't latch the door properly. They spent the day kayaking on the lake, trying to shake the unease. By afternoon, the sun warmed their skin, and the cabin felt normal again. Just a bad dream. That night, they turned in early. But just after midnight, Mia jolted awake. Jordan wasn't beside her. She called out. No answer. She heard something from outside. Rushing to the window, she saw him standing near the edge of the lake, in his pajamas, facing the water. "Mia," he whispered, but he hadn't turned around. She ran outside barefoot. "Jordan, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer. She grabbed his arm. He turned slowly, eyes vacant. "Mia," he asked, confused. I don't know why I came out here." They went back inside in silence. He had no memory of waking up or walking to the lake. Mia flipped open the diary again. There were more entries. "They whisper to you in dreams. They call you to the water. We burned sage. Didn't help. They're in the walls now. If you're reading this, leave now. The cabin doesn't want you to stay." That night, the scratching returned. Not outside. Not on the floor. Inside the walls. Near the headboard. It grew louder, more erratic, like claws tearing through wood. Suddenly, Mia screamed. Long, crooked fingers had burst through the wooden wall just inches above her face. Blackened skin, nails cracked and jagged, reaching blindly. Jordan pulled her out of bed, and they bolted downstairs. The walls echoed with whispering, unintelligible, layered voices whispering over each other like a broken chorus. They jumped in the car and tried to reverse out of the forest trail, but the tires spun in mud. It hadn't rained. The path was dry before. But now it was like sludge. Then came the fog. Thick. Fast. Swallowing everything. They were trapped. They sprinted back to the cabin, only to find the front door swinging open, and the diary lying open on the porch, the pages flipping violently in the wind. Inside, the fireplace roared, though no one had lit it. In front of it stood a figure. Tall. Unmoving. Its head jerked toward them. No eyes. No mouth. Just pulsing black skin, and a smile carved across its face like an open wound. Mia screamed. That was the last entry found in the diary, written in Mia's handwriting. The authorities discovered the abandoned car weeks later. No trace of the couple was ever found. The cabin has since been removed from all maps, its location lost to time. But hikers still report strange lights and soft dragging sounds near an unnamed lake deep in the woods. And sometimes, when the fog is thick, people claim to hear whispering, calling their name. Most people stop at roadside motels just to sleep, a quick rest on a long trip. But not all motels are just buildings. Some are traps. Some remember every soul that passes through, and some never let them leave. This is the second story in a series of 3 terrifying vacation tales you'll wish were fiction. In July of 2021, a 31-year-old freelance photographer named Erin was taking a solo road trip from New Mexico to California. She had always loved the idea of the open road, desert landscapes, forgotten towns, and endless skies. Her goal was to create a photo series called America's Lost West. 3 days into her trip, after hours of driving under a blazing sun, she realized she'd made a mistake. She hadn't booked a motel. Her phone had no signal, and the gas tank was just above empty. Panic crept in. As dusk approached, she saw a flickering neon sign ahead. Sunvale in vacancy. It was a squat, one-story building off a dusty turnoff. Beige walls, rusted sign, and a single gas pump out front. A strange blend of 1950s and forgotten. Erin stepped inside. The lobby was dimly lit. An old man with leathery skin and cloudy eyes sat behind the desk. He barely looked up. Room? Yeah, just for the night, she replied, glancing around. The place smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. He slid her a key on a heavy bronze tag. Room 11, he said. No smoking. Lock the door. Don't open it. Not even for me. She blinked. What? But he was already looking away, as if the conversation had never happened. Room 11 was the last door on the right. The hallway buzzed faintly, with flickering lights. She felt watched, but there were no cameras. No sounds. Just dust motes floating in the stale air. Inside, the room was surprisingly clean. Retro, but clean. Floral wallpaper. A small TV. A queen bed with stiff pillows. She locked the door, placed her camera bag on the table, and took a long shower. As she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, the TV turned on by itself, static blaring. Startled, she clicked it off. A moment later, it flicked back on, this time not static. A grainy video. It was footage of her, standing in the room, just now, getting out of the shower. She gasped and covered herself instinctively, but the footage was somehow already from a moment ago. She pulled the plug out of the wall. The TV stayed on. Her own face on the screen began to smile. But in real life, she wasn't smiling. Then the power cut. Pitch black. She scrambled for her phone, but it wouldn't turn on. Then the knock. Slow. Deliberate. 3 times. She crept toward the door, trembling. A voice on the other side. Let me in. It's cold out here. It was her voice. Not similar, exact. Like it had been recorded. She didn't speak. Didn't move. The knock came again. Faster now. I know you're in there. Let me in. The voice begged, cracking. She backed away. The voice became distorted, pleading, then angry. Then silence. She waited an hour before moving. Still pitch black. She barely slept, heart pounding with every creak and groan of the building. By morning, everything was back to normal. The TV was off. Her phone was working. Sunlight poured in. Had it been a dream? She returned to the front desk, where a middle-aged woman now sat. Erin asked about the old man. The woman tilted her head. My father ran this place, but he passed away 5 years ago. Erin's stomach dropped. But I spoke to him. He gave me the key. He told me not to open the door. The woman's eyes widened. Did you stay in room 11? Yes. She went pale. That room's been closed for years. Ever since. She stopped. Erin demanded to know. The woman leaned in. There was a man. A traveler. Checked into room 11 maybe 7 years ago. He recorded himself in the room. Something about hearing a version of his own voice outside. The next day, he vanished. Door locked from the inside. No signs of escape. Only thing left was his camcorder. Erin swallowed hard. She asked to see the footage. The woman shook her head. We burned it. Erin left Sunvale in silence, never telling anyone the full truth of what she'd seen that night. But something changed in her. Her photography turned darker. Empty motels, broken televisions, reflections that didn't match. To this day, she refuses to travel alone. And room 11? It's still sealed. But sometimes, travelers say they hear knocks at that door in the middle of the night. And if you listen closely, the voice sounds exactly like your own. Vacations are supposed to be a break from routine, a chance to disconnect, to recharge, to feel safe. But sometimes, the farther you go to escape, the closer you get to something that was waiting for you. This is the third and final terrifying story in our vacation horror series. In the summer of 2019, a young couple, Sam and Lena, booked a secluded Airbnb cabin nestled in the mountains of Oregon, just beside a still, glassy lake called Echo Lake. It had no phone service, no internet, and no neighbors for miles. It was exactly what they needed, or so they thought. Lena had been recovering from a traumatic car accident. She was battling anxiety and insomnia. Sam thought a quiet, isolated week in nature would help her reconnect with the world and with herself. They arrived just before sunset. The cabin was beautiful. Wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, huge windows facing the lake, and a wraparound deck. It felt like something out of a postcard. Their host had left a note on the counter. Enjoy your stay. The lake is beautiful, but don't swim after dark. You'll hear echoes. They're not always yours. They both laughed it off. A quirky local legend, probably. Lena even took a picture of the note and posted it later, joking. If I get murdered, at least it's scenic. That first night was calm. They drank wine, watched the stars, and sat by the fire. Lena smiled for the first time in weeks. But just past 2 a.m., she woke up. Someone was whispering her name. Lena. It wasn't Sam. He was snoring lightly beside her. She sat up. The voice was coming from outside, near the lake. She froze. The sound wasn't threatening. It was soft. Familiar. It sounded like her own voice. She shook Sam awake. He groggily followed her to the window. There, near the shore, was a shape. It looked exactly like Lena. Same pajamas. Same long hair. Standing ankle-deep in the water, facing the cabin. Not moving. Sam blinked. What the hell? Then the figure smiled and stepped backwards into the water, vanishing beneath its surface. They ran outside with a flashlight. The air was freezing. The lake was perfectly still. No ripples, no bubbles, nothing. Maybe you were sleepwalking, Sam said, though his voice trembled. Lena shook her head. It wasn't me. The next morning, Lena didn't speak much. She kept glancing at the lake. They found new wet footprints on the deck. By nightfall, Sam insisted they pack and leave. But when he tried starting the car, it wouldn't turn over. The battery was completely drained, though it had worked fine that morning. That night, Lena didn't sleep at all. She sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the front door. Around 3 a.m., Sam woke to find Lena missing. Panicking, he rushed outside barefoot. She was standing knee-deep in the lake, staring into the water, completely still. "Lena," he shouted. She didn't respond. He ran to her, splashing into the cold water. Her skin was ice cold. "Lena." Finally, she turned to him, her eyes wide, her voice barely audible. "She's in there." He grabbed her and dragged her back to the cabin. Inside, she whispered, "I heard her again. She says I died in the crash. That I'm not real anymore. She wants to take my place." Sam tried to comfort her, wrapping her in towels, but she didn't speak again for the rest of the night. At dawn, the car started on the first try. They left immediately. They never spoke of what happened again. Lena deleted the photo of the note. She never returned to the lake. A year later, the Airbnb listing for the Echo Lake cabin was removed from the site entirely. The listing's final review, from a guest who stayed shortly after them, simply read, "Woke up to see myself watching me from the lake. We left early. Some lakes reflect more than your image. Some echo more than your voice. Sometimes, the place you go to find yourself is where something else finds you first. Sometimes, it's not what you plan that terrifies you most, it's what you stumble upon by accident." The next vacation horror story is about two best friends and a motel in the desert that should never have been there. Alex and Darren have been best friends since middle school, the kind of friendship built on inside jokes, road trips, and shared playlists. In the summer of 2021, after a long pandemic year, they decided to take a spontaneous road trip through the Southwest. No big cities, no tourists, just empty roads, national parks, and the open sky. It was Darren's idea to drive through Death Valley at night. "It'll be cooler," he reasoned, "and way more scenic with the stars." Alex wasn't thrilled. Something about the desert at night gave him the creeps. But he agreed. They left Vegas around 10 p.m., snacks and music ready, and headed east. The radio lost signal within an hour. Then the GPS began glitching, flickering between directions, rerouting with no service. By midnight, the road ahead was pitch black. Not even moonlight. No headlights in either direction. Just miles and miles of barren silence. That's when they saw it. A glowing red sign on the right. Vacancy. Desert in motel. They hadn't passed any towns. Nothing had shown on the map. But there it was, a single-story, faded beige building with flickering neon. Alex hesitated. This place isn't on the GPS. Darren, tired and slightly buzzed from hours of driving, just shrugged. "Let's crash for the night. It's better than running out of gas in the middle of nowhere." They pulled in. There were no cars in the lot. The check-in office was dimly lit. Inside was a bell on the desk, but no one around. A dusty guestbook lay open, the most recent entry dated June 12, 1987. Alex flipped a few pages. Every entry before that was just a name and one word. Leaving. They both laughed nervously. Darren rang the bell. A moment later, a man appeared from the hallway behind the counter. Tall, thin, dressed in black. His skin was waxy, almost too smooth. Without a word, he handed them a rusted room key, room 6. The hallway to room 6 was oddly long, and the lights buzzed faintly. Their footsteps echoed like they were walking through an abandoned tunnel. Inside, the room was dated. Brown shag carpet, a rotary phone, a TV from the 70s. No outlets, no Wi-Fi. The walls were lined with dusty framed portraits. Every picture showed the same man, the one from the front desk, but in different decades. Sometimes with different names. Mr. Klein, caretaker, owner. Darren flopped onto the bed. Alex sat uneasily by the window, staring out into the night. "I have no signal," he muttered. Darren joked, "Old school horror vibes, man. Next thing you know, that guy's gonna be standing outside our room with a knife." But Alex didn't laugh, because just then he saw something move. There was someone standing by their car. No, someone's. At least 6 figures in black, all motionless, staring at the room. Alex backed away from the window. "Darren, we need to leave. Right now." Darren sat up, annoyed, until he saw Alex's face. They grabbed their bags and opened the door, only to find the hallway was different. Longer. Endless. Behind them, room 6 had vanished. There was no door. They ran. Every hallway curved into another. They couldn't find an exit. The lights flickered. A hum rose in the air, like whispers, speaking through the walls. Then, a door. They burst through it and found themselves not outside, but back in the check-in office. The front desk was empty. The guest book was gone. And a new sign now hung above the bell. "All stays are final." Alex and Darren were never reported missing. Their car was found weeks later, completely covered in desert dust, as if it had been sitting for decades. No motel was found near the location they'd marked on their paper map. The area was nothing but empty sand and scrub. But every once in a while, a traveler headed through the Nevada-Arizona border reports, seeing a flicker of red neon on the horizon. And if you follow it, you might not make it back. Our final story begins like many vacations do, with a search for peace, quiet, and a scenic escape. But what happens when the silence you crave starts watching you back? This is the horrifying account of a solo traveler, a secluded Airbnb, and the strange presence that refused to stay hidden. Lena was a travel blogger who thrived on isolation. Her brand revolved around solo trips to off-the-grid destinations, rustic cabins, old forest paths, and mountain getaways. In 2022, she booked a week-long stay at a highly rated Airbnb in the northern Colorado Rockies. It promised no cell service, no neighbors, and miles of pine forest in every direction. Perfect. She arrived late on a Tuesday evening. The host had left a lockbox with a key, as expected. The place was exactly like the pictures, a charming A-frame with a fireplace, creaky wooden floors, and wide glass windows that overlooked the forest below. But there was one thing that hadn't been listed: a narrow staircase that led down to a small, locked basement door. No key. No explanation. Lena noted it, but didn't think much of it. A lot of these mountain homes had old storage areas or unused cellars. She was more interested in photographing the sunrise from the balcony, brewing coffee in silence, and journaling by candlelight. On the second night, however, she noticed something strange. She'd locked the front door before bed, double-checked it. But when she woke up the next morning, it was slightly ajar. Only a few inches, but enough to let in a chilling draft. There were no footprints outside, no sign of animals, and still that cold, sinking feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. She brushed it off. Maybe she hadn't closed it tightly. But the next night, it happened again. This time, the door was wide open. The morning coffee mug she'd left on the table was shattered on the floor. And someone or something had left long, muddy handprints on the inside of the window. Not outside. Inside. She messaged the host using her offline GPS messenger, a satellite-based system for emergencies. The host responded the next afternoon. "I'm sorry, but there shouldn't be a basement door. That house doesn't have one." Lena read the message again and again. The basement door had definitely been there. She had even taken a photo of it. Except now, when she opened her camera roll, the photo was gone. All that remained was an image of an empty wall, as if the door had never existed. That night, she tried to stay awake, camera ready, flashlight in hand. At around 2:13 a.m., she heard it. The soft creak of stairs. Not the ones leading upstairs. The ones leading from the basement. Her heart nearly stopped. She tiptoed to the locked door, except it wasn't locked anymore. The padlock hung useless on the floor. Something had unlocked it from the inside. She turned and ran to her car. It was dead. Battery drained. No lights. No GPS signal. She was trapped. When she turned back toward the house, the front door was open again. And something stood inside the doorway. It was tall, too tall, and its limbs looked crooked, like they had been broken and forced back into place. It didn't move. Just watched her. Lena didn't scream. She didn't run. She just backed away slowly, toward the tree line, vanishing into the forest barefoot, dressed in her pajamas, clutching nothing but the GPS messenger. She hiked 6 miles through the cold before she found a ranger's station. She was incoherent, borderline hypothermic. But when they returned with her the next morning, the house was empty. The basement door was gone. No muddy handprints. No shattered mug. No trace of forced entry. But Lena knew what she'd seen. She quit vlogging 2 weeks later. Deleted her entire travel channel. When asked in an interview why she stopped, she said, "Because I spent years searching for peace in solitude, and now I know I was never really alone." Not every vacation ends in sunshine and smiles. Some end in whispers behind locked doors, footprints that vanish, and things watching you from the shadows of places you were told were safe. So the next time you're scrolling through vacation rentals or mapping out a road trip, remember, the scariest stories don't come from fiction. They come from those who lived to barely tell the tale.